So going back to a point that Nick raised about surprise in terms of breaking the input-output loop, and also Paul was talking about artificial general intelligence. So we have these self-adapting systems that are capable of creating their own way of operating and perhaps their own goals. What does this mean about verification and validation and also evaluation? Evaluate a system that isn't static.
Again, that's if I may go on this, take this first. Again, that's a prime example where our methods, as they have been, well, and actually not just our methods, you know, even in terms of software certification, just the basics of how you define this AI, even if just a program, they don't work. Because they are designed to be deterministic. So when you test the software, you're testing that every line, when you put X, you get the Y that you planned for. And that's not there. So in order to how you qualify whatever claims you make for that system, and how you, let alone certified with official authorities, you need new approaches. The good news is that in the last years, there's been quite a lot of work, especially from academic institutions to start with, but I think it's getting closer to you know, agencies like the European Aviation Safety Agency, and I think the CAA here in the UK has parallels, where they're looking at appropriate methods, and I think there are some ways going forward. But in principle, from, again, discussions like this I had before with non-HFE people, but also with some HFE people, the most promising one is to start to develop something based on how we qualify pilots, for example, which is a there is some determinism in our nature and physiology, etc. But we are the closest to existing non-deterministic systems. They are in the cosmos, as we know. So we have this graduated licensing where you basically certify and qualify according to the previous successful performance and behavior according to the standard you expect. So the surprises you mentioned there won't actually align to that. But other than that, because even the human pilots surprise us quite often. But other than that, that's the basis upon which a possible solution in this field is coming from.
I got a quick answer to that, Chris. I think that's a great question. I think, again, beyond the AI discussion, this is a significant limitation of HFE methods in that even systems HFE methods are static. You know, you're building static models of a very complex dynamic system. And so I think, you know, and I think your own work kind of inspired us a little bit. So with the project we're doing, we certainly think there's a lot to be gained from integrating systems HFE with computational modeling methods like agent-based modeling and systems dynamics. I think in particular for AGI, agent-based modeling is going to be useful, where, you know, you can actually, I think you can use the systems HFE methods to understand all of the factors in the system that are interacting to create and change and be dynamic, and then you can actually build your ABM model so you can actually have the agents learning and adapting as they may do in that system. And I think that's the way we're certainly going. And I think anybody who's listening, there's a recent special issue of Ergonomics on ergonomics and computation modeling, which was kind of looking at how these methods work, and there's some really interesting papers in that, so do take a look at that.
Yeah, that's a very good question, and a complex one that many regulators are trying in healthcare. Many regulators are trying to address at the moment, because on one hand, one of the main advantages or benefit that we can derive from AI is the fact that it can adapt to new situation, or to as it seems more patient, it will adapt its recommendation. On the other hand, that creates new risk and new challenges. So how we deal with that's very much an ongoing debate in healthcare. The FDA, for example, a bit more than 1 year ago, called for opinions of experts and feedback from the community on this question, and other regulators might produce guidance in the next years. Two options that I've read about, but again, that's still very much ongoing. One is to shift the evaluation and regulatory process from a product-based to system-based or organization-based. So you would certify a developer or a company that it's safe and has the internal process to carry iterative evaluation of their product with time. And the other one would be to have time-limited approval, meaning your product is certified for X years, and after X years, you have to reevaluate it. The question is how you reevaluate it after all those years. Is it just, you have to reevaluate the safety to see how it has evolved and with the new inputs it has, or do you have to reevaluate everything and restart a whole clinical trial? That's, again, a very much open question.
I think we can look at this even more broadly, because in many ways, I mean, healthcare specifically, but other industries as well, systems these days are what has been called complex adaptive systems. So they are changing all the time anyway. And if I'm thinking about what's happening, for example, in the investigation of adverse events, where there's now more interest about human factors, actually, I think organizational learning even needs to move a step further towards not just learning from adverse events, but from everyday work. And when you start learning about everyday work, you can see how the system changes, and that can be the AI developing new insights and new approaches. It can be the response of people to AI as they start trusting or distrusting the system as their work patterns shift. And so really what we need is methods for organizational learning inspired by human factors predominantly, or by resilience engineering, or whatever kind of approach you want to take, that allows us to pick up these weak signals, to have the ear on the ground, basically. So not just to wait for extraordinary events to happen, to be mindful of these everyday changes. And so we need feedback mechanisms that will help us then also to understand how the AI is changing. There's just one important consideration. I'm not sure whether it is specific to healthcare, but probably applies across industry. And that is data and ownership of data. So if we have an AI product, like a medical device for autonomous infusion pump, the manufacturer will say, send us all the data around the clinical context and we can improve the algorithms of the infusion pump. But sending that data means all the patient data, highly confidential stuff. I mean, there are a lot of privacy concerns. And actually, could hospitals even sell the data? I mean, if it helps one infusion pump manufacturer, it could help others. So they could argue there's actually a patient benefit, but so these are significant commercial and social interests here, which we need to consider.